Now Probert
got the right hand free.
He's loose with the right hand, and he starts to retaliate, and down goes Nyland, and the two of them are hammering each other.
Knights of Columbus, that hurt.
It's old-time hockey, the way you're supposed to play. You throw a little lumber if a guy gets in your way. You play like Gordie Howe or Eddie fucking Shore. We can't all be Gretzky's, the Muse or Bobby Orr's.
The enforcer of all hockey podcasts. It's the Biscuit. It's the Biscuit.
Damn it! Set goal regulation signs are what?
The enforcer of all hockey podcasts.
God help the fucking day if fighting's ever banned. As our country will stop working on Sabatman's fucking cans.
Hi, everybody. It's the Biscuit Podcast.
Hey, you wanna go? Yeah, okay. Good luck, man. Good luck to you too, buddy.
All right, Biscuit Babies. I'm here with Giles Ferrell of Zone Coverage, a writer for Zone Coverage, and the co-host of Giles and the Goalie, also a jersey critic. So I'm excited to talk sweaters here with you a little bit, too. How you doing, Giles?
Doing all right. How about yourself?
Doing great, man. Getting to talk hockey with my friends, and got a preseason game tonight, too, so I'm doing very good.
Yeah, definitely. It doesn't feel like it's about time for preseason hockey, but no complaints here. That means it's a great time of the year.
That's right. It does feel kind of odd, but I'm glad. You know, I was getting notifications on my cell phone, and I was holy shit! It finally happened. I made it through the summer.
Yeah, I completely forgot there was a wild preseason game last night, so I already made plans, and all I was able to catch of it was the shootout. Unfortunately.
So they did not fare well in the shootout last night?
They did, actually. They beat the Jets in the shootout, which was kind of unexpected. The Jets had tossed out their basically their A squad, and the Wild were putting out more of a minor league team, and somehow the Wild ended up winning in the shootout.
Oh yeah, I saw Patrick Laine played last night, didn't he? For Winnipeg?
I think it was Laine, Wheeler, and I forget who the third shooter was, but it was essentially their A team, maybe without a few players in there.
Damn. You guys were rolling some of the younger guys to get looks at them then?
Yeah, I think the only regulars that played were, I think, basically Charlie Coyle and Mike Riley, if you'd even consider him a regular. Right.
Well, hey, man, that's good to win when you got the, like you said, the B squad out there. That's always a good sign. Last season, 49-25-8, losing the playoffs again seems to be a common theme. I was bummed out when they lost in the playoffs, man. What do you think happened?
Well, I mean, you definitely were not the only one. It took Minnesota at least a good while to get over that playoff loss, and it was just one of those things where Jake Allen absolutely robbed the Wild in Game 1, and it seemingly became a mental thing for this team, and they just could never seemingly get over it. And Jake Allen ended up stealing the entire series for St. Louis, and
yeah.
Unfortunately, that's also a recurring theme of the Minnesota Wild franchise, is they make an otherwise average or below average goaltender look otherworldly.
That's not a good thing, huh?
No, but unfortunately, it's also something at least I have come to accept. So you see a team starting their backup goalie, and you just go, well, I'm gonna put money down on us getting shut out tonight.
Yeah, you see the backup come in, and you go, well, we just made this guy's career. Here he comes.
There's a reason Roberto Luongo never plays the Minnesota Wild anymore.
So you lose some key parts on this team. Palmerville leaving, Scandella. That was in the Foligno trade, wasn't it?
Yep. Both won the Foligno trade, and Tyler Ennis came back as well.
Tyler Ennis, and then Hula and Hansel and Kemper are all gone. Those are a lot of guys to lose, man.
Yeah, I think it's debatable which is kind of the biggest loss. Personally, myself, I wasn't the biggest fan of Marco Scandella. He did not have an overly great last couple of years here in hopefully a fresh start does him well. But, for me right now, I think the key guy that has to be replaced is Eric Hulla, who they lost in the expansion draft.
100%.
He was their third-line center, and when he was really going, he was, a key cog in the machine here. And right now it looks like Joel Eriksson-Ek and Matt Cullen are going to be the guys that competing to take his spot. And, if none of those work out, it might be Charlie Coyle to slide down the third-line center. But, there's no definitive replacement for him right now, and that's one of the bigger keys heading into training camp here is who's going to take that spot.
Yeah, that's why I'm looking at Daily Faceoff, and they have Koivu at the third center, and that's not a real thing, is it?
No, I haven't looked at Daily Faceoff yet, but I imagine the top two centers in the start of the year are going to be Koivu and Eric Stahl, and I believe right now Joel Eriksson-Ek is going to be the third-line center, at least to open the preseasons. Bruce Boudreau's been raving about his game here early in training camp.
Now, the good thing about the Palmerville and Scandella trade is it did open up some money for you guys to re-sign Niederreiter and Grunland, which had to happen for this team to move forward and be successful. Those are two guys you definitely did not want to lose.
No, both definitely were huge components of the Minnesota Wild last year, and Mikael Granlund led the team with 69 points, and he really finally took that step forward that everyone had been waiting for him to do. It had taken him maybe a few years longer than what was expected, but he definitely flourished in the first year under Bruce Boudreau, and the same goes for Nino Niederreiter. He is at a career high in points. I believe he had 57 last year, and he really did it in more of a third-line role. And once they signed Niederreiter to his new 5-year deal, they said that, hey, we're going to give him more ice time now. He's making the big bucks, so we're going to pay him like he makes the big bucks. And, if he can continue to produce like he has, you definitely can put him down for 30 goals and 60 points every year.
Yeah, and why not? These guys are going to be happy. They got money that they wanted. They're in a situation they probably wanted to stay in, a competitive team. And, Grunland going forward and Niederreiter too, now the trick is to stay at that pace that they set for themselves last season, to keep at that mark and keep pushing it forward. But they're going to be two players to look out for on this team for me. When I go up and down the lineup, those are the two guys that really stand out. Obviously, you have Parisi and Stahl, and the ever steady Jason Zucker, who just no one ever scores when he's on the ice. That dude his plus minus is retarded.
Yeah, I think the Wild had 5 guys with some ridiculous plus minuses last year of at least 25 or more, I believe, and I think Zucker was the one who was leading the bunch, and he definitely is going to be another key component to the Wild this year, and it's a contract year for him, so I definitely expect him to have a big year, because that seems to be Minnesota's luck, where they might be able to get a guy in a reasonable contract going into a big year, and then he puts up huge numbers, and then it just drives up his contract price.
Yeah, the power play unit for Minnesota, and they're scoring top 10 in the leagues last year. And that first power play unit, it only gets better. With Niederreiter getting the confidence that he needed, and he's going to get more ice time, so it's only going to develop his game further. So I am weary and worried, though, about this team, because the Central, with Dallas doing what they did this season, is going to be a tough time to figure out those top 3 spots.
Yeah, actually this week on Zone Coverage, I'm doing a preview of all the Central Division teams, and you're just kind of looking through, and Dallas didn't make the playoffs last year, and with their moves they made this summer, they're definitely going to factor back into the playoff picture. And Winnipeg is a young team on the rise, and you'd like to think that they're finally going to take that step forward this year. So really, you've got 6 teams in the Central that are going to be competing for playoff spots, and unfortunately, there's going to be one team at least left out. And in the Wild's sake, they hope they've left enough of this team that was second best in the West last year together that they can get back in again this year.
And with how tough the Pacific seems to be, they could cover both wild card spots. It wouldn't be out of control for that to happen. So it seems, top three or bust if you're a Central team. I know Chicago, I had my buddy from the Puck and Hostile podcast on here, and he's not so sold on what they have going there in Chicago. So that is, good news for Minnesota and St. Louis. And with Winnipeg, when you have Steve Mason in your net, you always have to be worried. So I hear a lot, and I've been reading a lot, people picking Minnesota to not make the playoffs. What is your take on this team, and what do you think is going to happen with these boys?
Well, with some new faces coming in this year, definitely a little bit of intrigue as to what kind of team we're going to see out of the gates. But they did a pretty decent job of keeping their main components together. So I think they're definitely going to be a playoff team this year. It just remains to be seen as to how or where they'll finish in the playoff picture. And they definitely could be a division winning team. It just kind of some of the other components, like having a good backup goaltender, not having a slump every spring.
Yeah.
These are two of the bigger factors that they need to clear to be the Central Division winners.
And Bruce has got to start winning some playoff games, man.
Yeah, that is the one thing that unfortunately hangs over his head. And now 2 training camps in a row, he's opened with joking about his playoff performances, and he seemed to take the St. Louis one pretty hard from what I've been reading in the papers and whatnot. But you hope that at some point something clicks and he finally gets that long playoff run that has eluded him all these years.
Yeah, probably not a funny joke to many people in Minnesota too. The state of hockey is ready for a Stanley Cup, so he seems to always do very, very well in the regular season. Always right up there with one of the best. He always rolls with one of the best teams in the league, and then something happens to that man. And it's not all his fault too. At the end of the day, the players are out on the ice, not Bruce Boudreau. So, but maybe he just doesn't have that leadership, or maybe they just caught a bad hand, all the time when he comes to the playoffs.
Right. You kind of think, how many more bad hands in the playoffs can you get?
Right. Eventually it's got to go up, I've been also reading a lot about this Joel Eriksson kid. What's your take on him?
He projects to be, one of their centers in the top 6 for the long term. He was their first round pick from the 2015 draft. He's a good two-way center. He's very solid in the defensive zone, and as he flashed at some points last year for Minnesota, he's got some good skills in the offensive zone. And he had a really good summer, and he was in the prospect tournament last week, and he had a really good tournament. And like I said, Boudreau has really been raving about him early on in camp, so you would like to assume that coming out of camp, he's going to slot in as their third-line center, and he's going to get every chance to be that third-line center. And,
come playoff time, if Minnesota is in there, I like the pickup of Kyle Quincy. I was surprised last year in Columbus when, it comes playoff time and we're playing Pittsburgh. A few weeks earlier had picked up Kyle Quincy, and, essentially he was the only man on the roster that had any sort of, deep playoff experience, with his time in Detroit, him and Brandon Saad, and, he was left off the roster for whatever reason. But I look forward to him, being on this defense and helping out. Not a young defense, but not deep into the playoffs experience-wise for these guys. And, Matthew Dumba's he's a very young guy still. Been in the league, but he's probably 25?
I think Dumba is just 23 years old, I believe.
And he had a hell of a season last year, and he seems to progress every year. He's getting better and better. And they'll have that, I don't know what it's called, but NHL Network will play it where they follow the Minnesota Wild players around. I'm sure it's on your local TV there.
It's Becoming Wild.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And from last year when they played with him, that dude works his ass off, man. He's in the fucking gym eating weird shit to stay healthy, and it seems to be working for him. His game has gotten way better, in the short time that he's been there.
Yeah, every year he comes back and he gets better. And, the last 2 summers he's been kind of the subject of maybe trade rumors as the Wild maybe try to acquire a younger forward who can kind of be a playmaker that they really need. But they've held on to him, and rightly so. He's been proving them right, and hopefully again this year he'll take another step forward and kind of put up a lot more points. Last year, it's kind of hard to believe, but he had like 35 points, I believe, which was 10th best by a defenseman in Wild history, and he did that at the age of 23. So really the sky continues to be the limit for him.
And what I liked about his game last year is he kind of, grew some hair on his nuts a little bit. He got a little tougher. He wasn't taking people's shit as much as I had seen him in the past. I don't know if that's just from being in the league and getting that experience and not wanting to take it, or if that weight training he's doing has his confidence up a little bit. But I like to see that from him. And I was worried, during the expansion draft, I had heard a lot of talk of him being exposed, and I like him being in Minnesota. I think it's a good fit for him and the team, and they're going to have to keep some young defensemen here because, these other guys aren't young. They're not spring chickens,
Right. They got Dumba, and they got a couple guys who are competing for a roster spot this year. Mike Riley, as I mentioned before, and they've got Gustav Olofsson. They're both going to kind of aim to be on that third pair with Quincy, and so there's definitely a little bit of youth there at defense. But like you said, these guys are getting up there in age. I think Ryan Suter's now 32, 33, and I think Jared Spurgeon's hitting his peak years of like 27, 28.
Yep.
And
now I like Gustav Olsson a lot. Now, do you think he can actually crack in there and make that 6th spot? I'd like to see him get some time.
Yeah, I've definitely been a fan of his. He kind of projects to be kind of a second coming of Jonas Brodin, the other defenseman on the Wild roster, which is kind of why I thought maybe Jonas Brodin was someone they were going to make really expendable this past summer, because you essentially got the same player. You might as well get rid of the more expensive one. But they held on to Brodin, and they have Olofsson, so their game is very comparable. Maybe with Olofsson having slightly more offensive skills than Brodin does.
Now, I think push come to shove, when it gets down to playoff time, a lot of this is going to be on the shoulders of Mr. Dubnyk. If he plays the way he did last year, he could take this whole team by himself to the playoffs. He was lights out and kind of reborn in Minnesota. Another guy from that television series who just working so hard to be better, and it was nice to see it pay off for him. He really had a breakout year, and for all intents, there's no reason he can't do that again. But if he doesn't, there's big issues in Minnesota.
Yeah, he's been a rock ever since the Wild acquired him, and really you can't ask for much more than what he's given Minnesota. My only concern with him is finally getting him a few more nights off during the year.
Right.
Every year, seemingly, the Wild have had to just play him nonstop from February to the end of the year because they've had no confidence in their backup, which was Darcy Kemper, but now they have a couple of guys competing for that job this year. So the hope is that they can get a backup in there who can spot him a few more nights off down the stretch, and Bruce Boudreau can sleep a little easier at night knowing he turned to his backup goalie.
Now, who do you see making the backup goalie. The only one on my radar is Svedberg, so I don't know any of the younger cats or the dudes coming up that could be the backup. But
it's either going to be Svedberg or Alex Stalock, the former Sharks goalie. Stalock was with Minnesota last year on their AHL team. He got a couple of spot starts in late March when Dubnyk needed a night off, and he fared pretty well. So it earned him a new contract this year and arguably a spot on the roster.
Now, with Dubnyk, I think one of these guys is going to have to step up and play some of those games because you do talk about that dip they take, and you had to have him coming in if playoff times is a thing, fresh and ready to play and ready to really get out of that first series and get this team and the state of Minnesota what they deserve, and that's, at least a shot at the cup. It's the state of hockey.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically what's expected of this team right now is, whatever happens in the regular season happens as long as they get into the playoffs, great. And then this team is going to be judged on how they do in the playoffs.
Right.
So if they get a deep, meaningful run, then the season will be viewed as a success. But if they go out in the first round again, then they'll be viewed as a failure again.
Yeah, they've gotten to a point where making the playoffs is expected. Now it's time to start winning, and that's a rough spot to be in as a team because making the playoffs isn't, easy peasy. It's a hard thing to do that alone, but then, you start making it and losing the first round every year, people get spoiled by it, and then now you're talking, what do you do there? You had to restart this whole team, which is full of talent, but, something's got to give here. Something has to happen with this group of guys that they have right now.
That's their motto this year. Good is not good enough. The players got all shirts and hats with this on it, and basically it's all on them finding that next level in the playoffs, which is, again, what they're just going to be judged on this year.
I saw it was a promotion or marketing thing for Minnesota where people can bring in their water to put it in the Zamboni, and they make the ice there in Minnesota actually people's pond water and stuff. Man, that's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Did you happen to get a chance to take any of your water there?
I did not. I had some going on that day where they collected it. It was actually this past Saturday. But, yeah, definitely something that everyone in Minnesota really loved, bring different, lake or pond water from wherever they skate or whatnot, or water that was just meaningful to them in whatever way. And they dumped it into the collection bin, and they're going to filter it and use it on the ice for, I believe, a game or two, if I'm not mistaken. But, yeah, definitely a neat promotion there from the Wild.
Now, is this the first year they've done that?
Yep. This is their first year of it, part of their Our Ice campaign.
Sorry about that noise coming in. My sister-in-law is trying to get a hold of my wife, and she's not getting the hint. And then also I have to, I asked for a cup of coffee, and my wife brought it out to me, and she's a Red Wings fan, and she brought it out in a Detroit Red Wings mug. So she'll be sleeping outside tonight. That's for sure. All right, bud. What is your prediction for this Minnesota Wild team?
Well, I've been trying to wrestle with how the Wild can fare for a couple of weeks now, getting back into the swing of things with the hockey season upon us, and arguably the Western Conference is just a big crapshoot. There's no team that can. Or that really stands out so far as here's the leader of the pack and here's the rest. So there's definitely a door open for the Wild to to take that next step, maybe win the division and make a long playoff run. And really for some of these older guys, this is really probably going to be their last meaningful kick at that can. So they have to make it count this year.
I agree.
For Bruce Boudreau, a guy who can hardly seemingly get out of the first round of the playoffs, that's also maybe one of his last kicks at that can.
Yeah,
So,
it might be goodnight Shirley if he doesn't do something this year.
Right. And also for the general manager, Chuck Fletcher, who's been kind of on the hot seat the last 2 off seasons, and he's been given another chance. And, if Wild go 1-0 again, arguably his job is on the line. So you'd like to hope that the Wild could make a long run, and they definitely have the talent for it still.
I would like to see him go far just so I can see Bruce Boudreau's face when he actually can win some playoff games. I just want to see how happy he gets and how red he gets.
Yeah, definitely better than a red, angry, mad Bruce Boudreau
Man, he can get like it's Bruce Boudreau red. It's a different color of its own, man.
Yeah, I think at one point last year I had to check to make sure my TV was outputting the color right because his face got such a weird shade.
Oh, holy shit, that's classic, dude. That's funny as shit. You have to pick 3 stars for this upcoming team, man. Who do you got? Give me your top 3 players for this upcoming season, Minnesota Wild.
This year I'm a big Niederreiter guy. I think finally he's going to get the minutes, and he's gonna reward the team for it. So I think he's going to be their. I guess I'll put him as their number 2 star.
Okay.
Their number 1 star is obviously going to be Devin Dubnyk, and if he can get the nights off and that he needs, he's going to be that all-star caliber goalie that he was through February last year.
Yes.
And that's exactly what they need from him. And then my 3rd star, I'm going to kind of fly under the radar a little bit. I'm going to go with Jason Zucker. It's a contract year for him. He was definitely a key component of the team last year, and I think he could flirt with that 30-goal mark in Minnesota's top 6 this year.
And he seems to do it quietly, too. He's always right up there in the numbers, and you don't hear a lot of talk about him. So, like you said, being a contract year, he might, go more balls out than usual, and that wouldn't surprise me at all to see him at that 30 mark, man. Someone's got to.
Yeah, and eventually somebody on this team is going to score 30 goals.
Yeah, it's got to happen. It's inevitable, right?
Yep.
Now, as I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, as a jersey critic, what do you think of the Adidas sweaters coming in for this season? What's your take on them?
And obviously, it's all in what team did what, but I'm still kind of in the middle here. I think there were some decent changes, but I think the one big drawback for me, at least, with the Adidas sweaters is the collars. There's just way too many weird collars out there, and just the colors that are being used. I think the best example that I have is Chicago, a jersey that's arguably one of the best in the history of hockey.
Right.
And the collar on their new, I believe it's the home jersey, it kind of makes you go, that is not a great look on that jersey. It's something I never truly thought I could say.
Now, yeah, that's it's a classic sweater, and I hear a lot of Chicago fans really pissed about the collar of, really, really pissed about it. Where they don't want it.
Yeah, fortunately Minnesota's collar is all right, so I don't have to worry about it. But yeah, if I'm a Blackhawks fan, I'm loading up on all the old jerseys on sale right now as much as I possibly can. I put off buying the new one for a while.
Now, did Minnesota go with the script Minnesota across the sweater, or did they go with the Wildcat?
Yeah, they went with the Bearhead, if you will, as the home jersey. And they kind of took a page out of the new Florida Panthers jersey where they have a stripe going across the front with the crest.
I did like that part of their new sweater. I do remember that now.
Otherwise, I think it's a solid look. I was a huge fan of the greens they've worn previously in the last 7 years, maybe without that shoulder pipe. But that green was a pretty good look. But again, Minnesota going with the green home, it's always a safe bet to go with green as your primary home jersey. So definitely no complaints there.
For sure. It is sad to see the third jerseys go, too, because Minnesota had a badass alternate jersey with the script on there. But what are you going to do? This is what happened. There's nothing we can do about it going forward.
Right. Unfortunately, it sounds like we're gonna get those back next year, so it's something to look forward to.
Well, yeah, they're gonna need to sell more jerseys next year after everybody pays $300 for them this year.
Yeah, that was probably my other biggest complaint about the switch to Adidas was the sharp spike in price of the jerseys.
Breaks my heart, man. I mean, because I'm going to buy one, but I would rather spend $200 than $300. It's a lot of money for a sweater, man.
Yeah, I told my girlfriend the other day, I said, I'm going to buy one, but I probably have to take an extra couple weeks before I can actually buy it. You got to save up for that.
Yeah, I sat down and said, all right, wife, kids, let's all pitch in, and Daddy wants this sweater, so I just asked for one thing all year. That's it. Giles, dude, this has been a blast, man. I appreciate you coming on, man, and tell the Biscuit Babies where to find you.
You can find me on Twitter at Giles Ferrell, and then you can find me on my podcast, Giles and the Goalie. You can find it on iTunes, and then my written works now can be found at zonecoverage.com/wild.
Hell yeah, man. I appreciate you coming on, dude, and good luck with the podcast and everything, bud.
Hey, thanks for having me on, and best of luck to you.
Yeah, party on. There he was. Giles. You guys know my fucking brain is what it is. I try. Some things I just can't say. Fuck you. That's what I have to say. Can you hear that? Was that enunciated correctly? I'm not doing any reads on this one. Fuck you guys. Freedom. Hockey. Bell Biscuit.